come to order.
It was a mess, but it's good now.
We're good. We'll now have a roll call, please.
Dr. Baker.
Here.
Ms. Chasnell. Here. Dr. Davis. Not present. Ms. Gonzalo.
Here.
Dr. Houston.
Present.
Ms. LaRiviere.
Here.
Ms. Louise is not present. Ms. Patrick. Here. Sister Carol. Present. Dr. Williams.
Here.
And Ms. Williams. Not present. So we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We will now ask our guests around the room to introduce themselves. Start back.
Everyone, I'm Paula Bell, Director of Background Credentialing.
Christy Blue, Director of Certification.
Judy Landry, Executive Director of Policy.
Judy Armstrong. Bessie.
Tom Costanza, Citizen Education Choice.
Keith Leger, Department of Ed, School Choice Liaison.
Caleb Moore, Department of Ed, Office of School Choice, Deputy Chief of Staff.
Brandon Cook, Department of Ed, Federal Support.
Daphne Floodroy, State Ombudsman, Department of Ed, Federal Support, Grantee Relations.
Department of Education, Federal Support.
Hi, I'm Megan Thompson. I'm the Education Deputy Advisor for the Office of School Choice.
Ishona Sanders with the Office of School Choice, Director of Nonpublic Programs.
Jermaine Gilson, Assistant Superintendent, Office of School Choice.
Denise Bourgeois, Director of Nonpublic Programs for School Choice.
And Keith has someone to introduce.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Want to bring y'all's attention that we have a new Assistant Superintendent over the Office of School Choice, Ms. Jermaine Gilson. We are pumped to have her on board on this team. We stole her from Jefferson Parish. She has a very, very lengthy career in education and one that also is very inclusive of school choice. And just wanted to invite Ms. Gilson to give us a little bio of herself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. I am Jermaine Gilson. I am very excited to be here. I spent 30 years in Jefferson Parish as a teacher first, still teacher at heart, administrator, was a principal, and was also chief district affairs officer there and handled our school choice options. I hail from Jefferson Parish. I'm a West Bank girl. Graduated from the Xavier Prep High School, and so having choice options for families across this state is near and dear to my heart, and look forward to working with you all.
Great to have you. You should have received the minutes from our last meeting, so I'll need a motion to approve the minutes. Sister Carol, second. Lisa Patrick, all in favor? Aye. Okay, our first item on our agenda is consideration of an update report regarding the Louisiana Scholarship Program and school choice. Is that you, Denise?
Yes, ma'am.
I need a motion to receive the report.
I'll make a motion.
Doctor, I just made you a doctor.
Thank you.
Kimberly, second.
Appreciate that.
Dr. Houston. Okay. It's
Good
yours.
morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I said good morning earlier. I'm going to fly through some of these first slides because I have good news to report. That tuition and fee deadline was yesterday, and we had very, very good participation, so we don't need to cover any of that business today. If you do have any questions, though, certainly I will address those, but I don't want to take up your time since we got all of our schools in. So that was good news for everyone. I did want to run through two very important things today, though. On the LSP side, this is the timeline for getting through the lottery and then what happens at the schools after the lottery. So these dates are going to be front and center in emails, in our monthly webinars, excuse me, everywhere until April 23rd. You are going to see these dates repeatedly because these are very, very important dates. Excuse me. Obviously, my allergies are kicking in this morning already. On April 1st, this is one of the most important days. The preliminary rosters are going to be dropped into your secure FTP site for each school, and it's very important that they go through those because that's going to be the telltale as far as who is coming to that school, who has been approved through the lottery. All of those pieces start to come together on these preliminary rosters. And then you'll see on April 22nd, the award notifications and letters email out to parents. So it's very important that we stay on this timeline to make sure that we get through the flow accordingly and don't get behind. So we need to make sure that the schools really stay on their rosters, they know who's been approved in the lottery, and they are approving them themselves. Any questions about this timeline? Okay, there's a couple of things with SCP that I wanted to go over this morning as well. I know not all of you have SCP schools, but we do need to cover this. It's very important. This is regarding the demand reports, and most of the schools already know because they work with the parents so far ahead of time because of the special needs. But the demand reports are the final reports that get put into FTP that the schools once again have to verify that yes, these students are coming, or no, this student didn't meet eligibility. So these demand reports are very, very important for the SCP schools to keep up with. They have until March 22nd to upload their final verified report back into the FTP for us. And then this is a similar timeline for SCP that we had for LSP. Very close, it's about a week off schedule. We try to stair step them a little bit, that way we make sure we have time for both groups. Obviously the application's already closed, and the final date to upload verified demand report again is the 22nd from each school, and then award notification and letters for SCP awards go out on the 29th. So it's a much shorter process, but no less important. Are there any questions about the SCP timeline? And then obviously if anybody has any questions, any of your schools need assistance, they can always reach out to the email that we have here, or they can also schedule office hours. Our office hours are always available, and again, in the newsletters, it tells you how to go about reserving those. And that way they can get some one-on-one time for questions. They're also very welcome to ask questions after the monthly webinar, which is tomorrow. So that's very timely, but the office hours will give them some private time if they have longer questions. And I do have one other reminder that Ashley Townsend asked me to make this morning. I think there must have been some questions about some of the bullying language that had changed. She just wanted me to remind everybody that non-public schools are still required to have a bullying policy that complies with state statute, and LDOE will still be required to report bullying reports and reports of failure to act to the legislature. I think there must have been some questions out there about that, so she just wanted me to make sure that I reiterated those things this morning. So, any questions about anything in our world, any concerns about lottery or anything else that's going on right now? No? Okay.
Who was it that
Yes.
we would speak to about the bullying policy?
It'd be Ashley Townsend. Yes. Yes. Okay.
And Dr. Houston, you can also send it to me as well. I think the question was about the failure to act, and that the schools just simply needed to have their own. It wasn't outlined for you in 741 anymore of what it is that you do, but you can create that as your own.
So we have a policy for reporting.
Yes.
But my question, I guess, really is going to be, do we report all of that to LDOE? And if we do, how do we do that?
Yeah,
That's
you can
the-
send that to
Okay.
us.
Okay, well, the files are going to the lottery this week for LSP, and so everything is moving along, and we'll all be seeing lists of students real soon. So
Thank you
very
Denise.
much.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any opposition? Okay, moving along, 4.1, Ms. Daphne. Motion to receive the report. Dr. Houston, second. Dr. Baker.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is consideration for State Ombudsman's report.
As we discussed at the last meeting, we talked about the Titles II and IV Equitable Services State Set-Aside. At the time, we kind of talked about two. It affects Titles II and IV. Of course, we've been doing extensive research regarding all of this, but before I preference anything, this is what I'd like us to share. And as you know, we've always had the working relationship with you all from our Federal Support and Programs Department that we work together, whatever it is, we research it and we will fix it. Okay, that's our thing. We fix it. If it can be fixed to a yes or a no or direct for one party or the other, we reach workable compromises. And that's what's very important. And I'd like to preference this too by saying, please understand that SCA Title II and IV from previous administration was not housed in federal programs. So therefore, now that it is housed in federal programs, with Burnell leading that, you all already know we've been digging deep. We've been digging deep. We've been having consultations among ourselves with other states, with some of you all, so we know what it is. And what I'd like to say is sometimes people do blanket transparency because they think if I just give you an overall view and just kind of touch on different things, that's good. But where we are and in federal support and grantee relations, we believe in intentional transparency. And intentional transparency simply means that we're not just going to disclose a lot of information and kind of fluff over something. Intentional means that we're looking at a specific issue or problem, and then we're going to work together to resolve it, bring change, and move forward. So that's where we are today. Here is what we expect and want to do. To be intentional and transparent, as well as clarify the federal guidance for SCA 2 and 4 set-asides. The SCA Title II and 4 set-aside budget, as I stated, is now housed in terms of federal programs. Please note that happened recently in terms of, I think, somewhere in last year, but it is definitely ours this year and probably for the future. We have done, as I stated, an in-depth research to find out what's what, how it should be, and making sure that it will move forward in that direction. How we're going to do this, one way is through continuous consultation, but you have to know this. You have to understand, and all of us do, including the LDOE, we're going to do this by various ways. Webinars, surveys, polls, face-to-face sessions, and whatnot, to gather the information that's needed that's based on your specific needs. So what is your accreditation report telling you? What are you seeing when you go out and you are observing your administrators in the schools? What are your administrators telling you that their needs are? That's what we look at, that's what you report, because, and you will see this later on, but just in a nutshell, the LDOE has to do outreach to all private schools in this state. Guidance states that you may talk to a committee or a subgroup, but from our research and digging deep, we now know that there are other states that have dealt with this. And one of the things that the feds have said to them in their monitoring is you can't just talk to a work group or a subgroup. You need to do outreach because this benefits all of the private schools in your state. Now, in our case, it benefits the schools that are approved by Bessie. The same schools that we provide the other equitable services to, that's who we are reaching out to. But another key factor, we, as the LDOE,
must ask you about your needs prior to. We know the situation we're in now. Everybody has been working beautifully. I can tell you, every department is on target. What does non-public need? What to do? We've sent out flyers. The LEAs have been wonderful. They sent out the last flyer. They should have sent one to you guys too. They sent out the flyers again after registration was extended, and all of them are saying things like, hey, let's do this. We can help you get there, and that kind of thing. But just to know what's going on. So, one of the things that you shared with me was, Daphne, do you see non-public on that flyer? That was in the smaller print.
It just got added, because it was not in the original flyer.
It was not in the original flyer, and that is correct. But I did do exactly
You did.
what I said. I went the next day, and they did add it at the bottom part that talks about it. You will see it on the flyers now because it says public school, non-public, charter school. But we talked about it, and it said, let's make it more visible. So we have calling all non-public educators and leaders. Because what you must know about this is, this takes care of everybody. And that is one of the great things about it. Strategies in terms of effective teaching, leadership, assessment, whatever. Whatever anybody wants, and it is my understanding, we can basically do that because we know that evidence-based, research-based, best practices are what all of us use. And as I'm sharing there, it was sent to all the LEAs twice to send directly to the non-public schools, to you all. It was in the non-public newsletter, and Office of School Choice has been working with us on this, and we are also be sharing it on the webinar. Also, all social media that this department uses, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and whatever all of those different social media things are, because I would not be able to say all of them. So, looking at this, what does the federal guidance say in relation to this? Now, what I did was, from our federal support, we put the exact guidance so that you have it. Didn't change the wording, didn't change how it's set, except maybe paragraphs to make it easier for the slide presentation. But what I want you to do is right here. Now, you had this before, but it doesn't hurt to print it out again. That's it. You see where it says Part B, page 27. It's going to spell it out to you, but this is it. Question came up, is it in statute? It says it right there under section what? 8501A1. Yes, it's there. And so we're giving that to you so that you have it. If you need to explain it to your administrators and people, you know. And when we do this, to do the full outreach to everybody, webinar, poll everywhere, surveys, we're gonna always share this. Here is the next one. What options are available for the funding? Now, note this. It says the SEA determines the amount to reserve for the equitable services and the amount available for the public and private children in the area, the state to be served, taking into consideration the number and needs of the eligible private school children and educators. State level activities, this is what this is about, state set aside. State level activities in which the private school educators may participate must be determined in consultation between the SEA and appropriate private school representatives. such as a state-level private school working group. Again, as I stated earlier, that's what the guidance says. But what we know from the United States Department Office of Nonpublic Education and from states who have gone through this, their finding was you did not do enough outreach. You have to do outreach beyond your group.
So I represent the schools in the Archdiocese of New Orleans.
Right.
We have done a district accreditation, and that is our school's focus areas for moving forward. I feel comfortable speaking on behalf of all of my schools.
Yeah, that's fine.
That participate in district accreditation.
Yes.
So, in my opinion, it would be redundant to survey them when we already have a document
Yeah.
that I would be happy to share with you.
I know. No, if you recall in our conversation,
Mhm.
I asked, tell me, what is it
Right.
saying?
Mhm.
So that's all I want. And you can, if somebody else has a document, you just want to highlight, that's fine with me. Send that to me. But we discussed that, and that is fine. But for those who do not have anything like that, this would be a good way for you just to send to me so that we will know. Because with our curriculum department, we're going to be looking at that, and I'm sure we're just going to check it off, because most of the things, like we said, that's being presented is definitely for all educators. Next, what options are available? This is what it says in reference to that. Please note, ED requires inquiry and input via consultation from a wider representation of the non-public schools than for the allocation to provide services to all non-public schools. So, with that being said, the next important thing, prior to any planned SEA activities. So it's just like with a transfer. LEAs are to come to you and talk to you and discuss a transfer or your administrators before it's done. So what this is saying, LDOE needs to gather that input, get your information, then discuss that, make their plan, present it to you. Let's say they present the plan and we're not exactly on the same page. LDOE must justify that in writing. But as I noted, we have always been able to work through anything. Now, this is about the calculation, and of course, this information will give that to you in detail. But it is reserved on the equitable services for our non-public private school on a per pupil basis. So the amount available for all of the children, and then we look at those enrollment amounts. So what has to happen there is we have to go back, look at who's approved on the academic classification list. Those are the private schools that are approved by Bessie. Take those enrollment counts, but let's make sure we clarify one thing. Those are enrollment counts of all the schools that are being provided with equitable services. You are aware some are what? For profit. We cannot provide services to for-profit schools, only schools that are nonprofit. And so that's what that guidance is going to explicitly say. This was a neat chart. And if you look at this chart, it really gives a good overview of how that state set-aside funding works. Page 26. Generally, the amount of funds reserved for spending at the SCA and LE levels have not changed. However, Title II, Part A of SCA includes new optional SEA reservations for principal and teacher leader support, principals and so on, to help with academic preparation. So if we look at this, sorry about that. This section, this is where it comes from. And with that 5% is where we take that particular allocation. And that is what we're looking at. And so this is what happens for Titles 2 and for Title 4.
Excuse me, yeah.
Yes. Go back.
That other slide, don't forget, you have to, just like LEAs, take out administration.
Yes, we do have to take out administrative
So there's
costs.
the 5% that the state can put aside. Of the 5%, up to 1% goes to administration.
Yes.
Administering funds. Up to 2% goes to teacher, principal, and or other school leader preparation academies, and the remainder for other state activities. So where does the non-public equitable share come in?
When you take into account these last three items, it's coming from right here. That's where we calculate it from, and you're gonna see it.
So basically, it's the
Okay.
You're gonna see it in just a minute. It says what are the responsibilities, and also it states the provisions for equitable services, private school children and teachers with respect to funds being transferred. So that's why we have to come to you to discuss that up front about transferring anything, just like the LEA does. SEA, same kind of thing. Same thing. Note that it says before the SEA or LEA may transfer funds from a program subject to equitable services requirement, it must engage in what? As you already know, consultation with appropriate private schools officials, respecting the transferred funds. The SEA and LEA must provide the students and the teachers the equitable services to which and from which those funds are transferred, and based on that total amount of fund after the transfer. However, the final decision in terms of transfer would be left up to the LEA or the SEA. Now, here's what we wanted to see, and before I began on this is what I want to say. We've really been working with Dr. Houston on this, and thank her for calling this to our attention too as well. And also understanding the fact that federal programs and grantee relations were kind of like, what are you talking, what's going on? Because we did remember and recall that we have discussed about transferring the 2s and the 4s before from previous administration, but because we were not involved in that directly, we just assumed everything had been done. Now, this is the 2 years. As I said, Dr. Houston and I have been communicating, and so she did state that to me, and she did put in writing to us, which we truly needed, that she was also interested in the 10 years. Please understand, we are working on that. You gotta realize we're digging way back. Usually it's anywhere a 5 to 7 year window, but we're trying to accommodate because we do understand what is going on and the concern for it. But what we did do was last year and this year, this is for Title II, and you see what the reserve is, understanding that portion of that can be administrative costs. But when we take the enrollments and we do the math, for 22-23, it was $278,698.69. And for this year, it is $224,847.17. Now, again, that's previous year and this year. And just know, when I tell you, everybody was working on this, trying to be sure that enrollments on both sides were correct. Not just the non-public, but the public too, because that also is a key factor in the calculation. Acts 2. This is Title 4. Title 4 for 22-23, $135, $222.30, and this year $136, $560.38. As I looked at this myself and also stepped into your shoes, sometimes we say, what's the difference in the years? The difference is the enrollment. Sometimes enrollment increase, sometimes enrollment decrease. And as I analyze it, it was truly coming from the enrollments.
And Daphne, one thing I would add is that the agency has purposefully allocated or supported our Teacher Leader Summit with Title II funds. But as Daphne has said here, we're just trying to be as transparent in terms of letting you see the actual calculation. Although Title II has supported that activity, which is one of our main events in supporting teachers and leaders across the state. So let's be clear with that. We have designated Title II funds in the past to support that activity for our teachers and leaders. But we're here being more intentional in terms of getting your input, and consulting with you to make sure we assess your needs and moving forward.
I want to publicly thank Daphne and Brunel because, first of all, I didn't even realize Title IV was included in this. So that's funding that, and we get equitable sharing that was not aware. I was only aware that it was Title IIA, so I appreciate the honesty and transparency there because you could have not included that and I wouldn't have known any different. So I do appreciate that. This is not you all. In previous administrations, when it was not under your department, I don't ever recall us as a body or as individuals being consulted about teacher leader. And as I said before, we were not initially invited, then we were not, then we were given a few seats. I do appreciate the push, but I think we as a non-public body need to convene ourselves and talk about what we think is best for our teachers and our leaders. I personally don't know that Teacher Leader Summit is the answer for our schools and for us as an archdiocese. But that doesn't mean everybody feels that way, and I recognize that. And this is not just about our schools, it's about a collective group of non-publics. And I'm gathering data from other superintendents, other Catholic school superintendents in other states who do utilize that funding with their non-public counterparts to host statewide initiatives and activities for non-public schools specifically that are not tied to public school LDOE offerings. So I just want us to know that we have to reach out to our counterparts. I'm working with two people to establish an entity, an organization under the CAPE umbrella that will enable all non-publics to be members and to have membership and to have a voice so that we're organized and we are consistent in our communication and clear in our communication as non-public schools. So I want to thank you for all of this. I wish that we had known all of this before because there's a lot that we could have done this year. I recognize there are commitments that the state has already made with Teacher Leader. I don't know if there's any way that non-publics can recoup any equitable share in that. Like I didn't register for Teacher Leader Summit because the last time I registered, I was canceled. So I did not, and I can't tell you that. I know a lot of my schools didn't because that's for public schools, is what we've always been told, and that's kind of how our schools have operated because that's what we were conditioned to believe from the very beginning. So I think there's going to have to be conversation and assessment on the non-public part. Then we can make a recommendation and have consultation with you all as a body of non-public schools. And we can't, again, speak for everyone, but we just want to include all of our counterparts.
And I appreciate that, and you know I appreciate the honesty because we've never been anything else but that, and it's been that way with everyone sitting in this room. But what I would like to say is this. We're gonna get the input. We're gonna see what the LDOE wants. And let's say that if the LDOE says, hey, we can make sure that we have sessions on the things that work for non-public, even if the LDOE says we can do a non-public track. One of the things is this. It gives us a broader range because, as I said, and many of you have shared similar stories with me that she shared about not being included or being told that you couldn't participate or you only had 2 or 5 seats in. And I understand all of that. And Burnell and I receive that, respect that, and definitely making sure that more is being done. And I can tell you that the Office of Curriculum and Learning, or Learning and Curriculum, understands and did not know as well. But also, I'd like to say, as of yesterday, LEAs are having several, more than they probably had before, non-public teachers to sign up, and a few administrators. One of the things is this. We have to remember that the funds is to support all of the non-public schools. I have talked to states too, as you know, that do things a little differently. But one of the key things that they've said to me in those conversations is, wow, you all have something that it could include everybody and keep a focus. And I said, yes. However, we've got to get the buy-in, we've got to get to know the needs, we have to see what it is, and how can we work that? And how can we, and possibly could do it, combine what our private schools want with what is going on to make something even bigger and better. Because as I said, you can always have that non-public track. Another thing to all of it is this too. When we talk about, let's say, specific companies or consultants that have to do with non-public and exactly what the needs are, you have consultants out there who understand. Teacher Leader does not pay the $5,000 contract. But what they do, they offer a chance for the vendors, the consultants, the businesses, to have sessions with the people that are there, as well as make contact for later. They understand. Just taking a hypothetical poll. Hey, would you be okay with presenting, knowing you're not going to get your contract paid? They said, sure, because that's technically free advertisement. We get to network with teachers and administrators, and it would work. All we need to know is what is the topic, what is the strategy. So we have people that we know will help, and we have to first of all hear everything that she is saying and everybody else in this room is saying on that.
Are you saying that we don't have a choice to opt out of Teacher Leader and to do something different?
No, I'm not saying that, because if I said that, I would be what?
I'm
I
just
was
asking,
compliant.
because I feel like that's the push, and I understand that that's a good chunk of money in Title IIA and Title IV that are Title IIA specifically that's used for Teacher Leader Summit. I just want to make sure that we're not being told that we have to.
We're not saying
be a part of that.
We're not saying that you have to be a part of it, because what does federal guidance say? We have to find out what your needs are. Hear your ideas, which you stated clearly.
Because I'm just saying,
and
we have things that we do, like we host an administrators conference every year, and we invite administrators from the whole state to come and their leadership teams to be a part of that. That could be something that I know at least the Catholic schools will participate in, but it's open. I mean, any of our leaders can participate with their leadership teams. Based on what the agenda is, they make decisions on whether or not they're gonna do that. We do a 2-day teacher professional development in my diocese, and I know other dioceses do it as well. We could make a statewide non-public teacher conference or teacher leader conference on our own that we already do that's geared to faith-based non-public schools, or just non-publics in general. So I just wanna make sure, because I read the guidance, I got my documents, I got my funding. I got my funding from 21 and 22 and 2021. I didn't have the most recent 22 and 23 because it is all public.
Yes,
All public documents.
It is.
On the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Yes, ma'am.
But I think we need to know that's one of our options, but we also need to be able to consider other options as well. I don't want anybody to walk away thinking that
You have to do.
we
a
have to do
particular
teacher
thing.
summit, and that has to be a part of, that has to be what we do with that.
No, what it is everything that you're saying and Teacher Leader Summit will be part of the options. Then we have to look at that and see how can we mesh that? What's the best thing to do? What's the most cost-effective thing to do? What addresses all of the needs? Now, if we sit down collectively, which we will do, and look at that and we say, hey, if we take some of what you're speaking of, some of what's going on, do a non-public track to that, something that we know is working, something that in some cases we know you have not had before due to either low-level seating, denials, or what have you. Here we are saying we want to make it right. Now, in making it right, it also means that that's just one thing on the table. So we look at all of it and make sure that, we are addressing what everybody wants to hear. Because we have to hear from others out there who may say something, because there's a Muslim conference, there's a Lutheran conference, Episcopalian. So we want to look at everything and see what can we do to bring it all together so that we are in a posture to service everybody, hopefully under one or a few programs. So bottom line, and thank you very kindly, and bottom line for clarifying and moving forward to be compliant with the equitable services, this is kind of like a tracking activity. So in November to December, you see what took place. We've been consulting with Dr. Houston up until present, and we're looking at those set-asides, and we have identified the need. The LDOE was implementing, but needed to be more intentional and transparent with the budgets and provide more outreach to non-public for their input. The Office of Federal Programs and Grantee Relations began a deep dive, in-depth research regarding the federal guidance. LEAs conducted outreach to have more non-public school teachers, principals, and others that are instructional staff to register for the teacher leader for this year. Remember, we are in planning stages for next year, and so this is why I am asking you for that information, because that information needs to be looked at by teaching and learning in order to determine what's next, what plan are they going to devise to offer, and then when it is offered, also seeing what you have so that we come together. It is not to be, as you know from guidance, that we say, here it is, this is what you're going to do. That is not the case. Now, as you see, continuing to follow up, networking, coming up with next steps and what have you, then also getting the documentation needed for the calculations. If you move over to March to April and beyond. 1, we thank teaching and learning for extending the deadline. The LEAs, once they found out, sent out another flyer and getting requests. Some private schools are even asking, hey, can I make a change to some things? Also, we're looking at it in terms of, again, the transparency. And as I said, intentional transparency. We're going to conduct the outreach, as I stated earlier. And also, there's going to be an evaluation so we can find out what's happening, so we'll be able to report that to you when we sit down to discuss where we will move forward and what we will do. The work group will be established to specifically address non-public needs before any final decisions are made, because that is exactly what is going on, and that is what other states are finding. So we want to definitely move forward in the right direction. And that next step now is polling all of the non-public schools that are on the BESI approved list, and then establishing that work group so that we can move forward. And that work group will consist of LDOE, non-public private as well. Any other questions? As always, you know, I thank you for the collaboration. I truly mean that, and you know that. And so we have embarked on a project, and I am sure that we will resolve this successfully. And just know that is for 2 and 4. New topics. The Eames Grant closeout process for property. The LDO property team is preparing the closeout portion of the grant. And in the coming weeks, they're going to send you out questionnaire to all public schools that participated in the programs. The non-public schools will be asked to evaluate all of the property, reimburse, and that which was procured by the agency to review and determine the direction in which the school intends to follow concerning that property. You can also, if needed, purchase those properties through the surplus. Please note, if a non-public school can use a property for other state programs and provide a written justification on how their property will be utilized in the state program, you get to keep the property.
When you say state program, what are you referring to?
Well, basically, it would be state or federal. This was more or less like state. So whatever you're using it for now, you can continue, just justify it.
Okay.
I'll give you a perfect example, and that is the touchless water fountains.
Yes.
That is just like people are even now taking out the other ones and putting those in. And so that's a very good example of what we are speaking of.
Could you repeat that sentence? I didn't hear what you said.
She asked me basically what, you know, we're talking about and what state funds. So it is the funds and the items that was purchased through this grant. And I use the touchless water fountain as the perfect thing for something that you would want to keep, you know, until it just falls apart.
So if it's devices like Chromebooks that we're using in Lexia, with Lexia or intervention, something to target learning loss, et cetera, just justify. Okay.
Justify, call me. Okay. Before we move to the next person, this last tidbit is EAF will be ready in a couple of weeks. The state is, I'm not gonna bet on it, nor money nor dinner.
Yeah,
But
it is concerning that these funds used to be received as early as January. You know, our diocese is fronting all of this money ahead to purchase things, and now it seems like we're getting it later and later and later. Now we're getting it, I mean, we might not get it in March. We likely will get it in April or May, and that's hard.
Well, they're saying in a couple of weeks. And so we'll stay on top of that for you and let you know. They are saying a couple of weeks. I can tell you that they are truly working on it. They're having meetings after meetings, trying to get that done.
Possibly the delay was because of the new administration, the new elections, the new people on the Senate Education or Senate Finance. So perhaps that was it?
It's part of it.
Part of it, okay. Well, the part that's not, y'all work on that part.
Yes, ma'am. We are. That's why you're probably gonna get it in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Because we are working on it.
Good
Thank you,
deal.
Daphne.
And Sister Carol, I'm sorry, that was, we couldn't schedule the meeting with the Senate.
I understand.
Yeah.
And we couldn't move forward. And so they squeezed us in
That's
last
frustrating
week.
for
Yeah.
y'all. Well, I knew they'd been here since January 8th, so I thought, not you. Yeah, we're
You all advanced source last night, 70 of them. 71 of them went advanced source last night.
Additional if you need.
And don't have to, because I'm thinking if this.
Thank you, Daphne and Vanilla.
If we sit back, where will the justification come from? Would be requested of us?
Yeah. I tell you, whatever you know it is, you just justify it. We'll work with you on that if need be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Any further discussion? Any opposition? Okay, moving right along, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 746. Who's that? Who's it? Oh.
We're doing tag team.
You really want to do this?
Were your ears ringing last night? We were talking good about you. We were saying some wonderful things. Okay, I need a motion to receive the report. Sister Carol, second. Kimberly.
Good morning. I'm going to first start, I don't know if we have shared this with you all, but our division is growing. Dr. Arthur Jofrion is our Deputy Assistant Superintendent, and we now have not only certification and background credentialing, we also have preparation, accountability, evaluation, all the things around educator talent and workforce development. So it should not really negatively impact your work, but as such, Dr. Jofrion did want me to send his apologies for not being able to attend today. You know, his schedule is even more booked than it was before, but he knows that you're in good hands with Paula and myself. So we'll first start with some credentialing updates, and so I will turn it over to my colleague, Paula Bell.
Good morning, thank you, Christy. So part of a recent law that's gone into place, it's a revised statute 17-8.9. Thank you, Christy. Requires criminal background checks, CBCs, rap sheets, various names that we give them. That law is going to require the background check for certification of credentialing. We're putting the horse before the cart now. Because previously, it was that the background checks were done for employment purposes. Revised statute 17-15. So we're writing that. We are going to, the law is much more comprehensive than what has historically been in place for the employment purposes. So instead of employment purposes, it's now also being required for certification. So before we can issue a certificate after January 1st, 2025, it will require that the individual go through a background check that will be sent to the Department of Education for review before we press the button on giving them a teaching certificate. So if a person already has been issued a certificate, that's a lot of educators out there that hold certification, prior to implementation of the new law, LDOE does not have necessarily a cleared background check on them. We may if we had received something through the employer, but they will eventually be required to go for a background check for their certificate, for the purpose of their certification. So we're working with Bessie now to establish the policies that will guide this work. Our team is growing because of this work, so that we can have people in place to quickly review those rap sheets before we issue a certification. So best practices regarding background checks, because you've been doing them, we encourage you during this implementation of 17.8.9 that the employing school systems may determine that an individual with a certificate issued by LDOE has a cleared background check. That's where we want to go. We want to have it such that you can reliably look at that person's certificate and know that they have gone through a background check and are cleared. This new law also requires that we advertise when there has been censure on a license. So if a certificate has been denied because we've had to deal with some type of issue on their background check, you'll see denied on their certificate. It is publicly available on teachlouisiana.net. If they've had a suspension or a revocation, you will see it there. It will be public record. And we've had to work with our technology team to build that into our certification database.
Now, you won't know why, but it'll be one of the 4 reasons, either a criminal background check issue, fraudulent document issue, cheating on testing issue, professional conduct issue, one of those things. It won't say that it was before a criminal background check.
Correct. There are various reasons, and that will be outlined in Chapter 19 of Bulletin 746. It currently is outlined there, but it will be revised such that it's very clear what censure can take place on a certificate. So during the transition and implementation period, this is what I was trying to get to. I would encourage you as the employing school system to continue to do your background checks, because this is fresh and new for us. So this doesn't actually go into place until January 1st. And at that point, it's only for your newly certified individuals. So we encourage you to continue doing the background checks on those individuals for the time being as we build this. Even after the implementation of the law, the background checks would still be required for employment purposes for those individuals who are not certificated. So you want to continue doing that. Yes, Dr.
So our policy requires that we conduct our background checks, and we do it every 3 years for our employees. So they're going to be double cleared. You're going to clear them to give them a certificate, and then we're going to make them do another background check and safe environment training and fingerprinting when they come on, correct?
Yes.
For certification, it'll only be once for us because we have that wrap back legislation, and then you still have the right in the employment law to do it as you wish.
Yeah, part of the law is that the state police will send us wrap backs for individuals who we've already done background checks on if something pops up. So it's kind of one and done for us. Now, we will, under the new law, be given the authority to request a background check if we see that there is an issue. Whether we see something in the media, a parent has reported something to us, we can, and under this law, have that authority to run that background check again. So all of this is being built into our data systems, and we're hoping that it's going to look kind of like a ticketing system to where those individuals who don't hold certification, they come into the queue, they get a ticket that sends them immediately to go get a background check, and then that information comes into our system, our staff reviews the rap sheet, and then hit clear, then they go to the next queue to be issued their certificate. These are for your newly certified individuals beginning January 1st, 2025.
Now, one other thing about background checks, we all know they're only as good as the day they were run. Something could happen 5 minutes after, so just keep that in mind also.
Yes, sir.
So just for clarification purposes, so when we hire someone, we conduct a fingerprint process through the new state police process. We also, as Dr. Houston alluded to, we conduct a background check, and then subsequent background checks every 3 to 5 years, depending on what diocese or district you're in. But does the new law say we have to fingerprint them again, or just conduct background checks?
I think I was under the understanding that's one and the same.
Pardon?
We talking about background. She's talking
They're not the same.
They're not the same.
Okay.
They're not the same for
All right.
us.
So the new, this new law requires it's going to be a shared responsibility between Bessie, because they're the ones that are going to approve our policy. It's going to be a shared responsibility with the Department of Ed, because we've got to be able to make this happen and communicate it to our stakeholders, and communicate in a way that is open to feedback, and build this together to where it's a reliable source of seeing and understanding the background check in terms of a certification. It's also a shared partnership with educators in general, your administrators, your teachers. There are reporting pieces in this law that's going to require those individuals to report criminal convictions within 2 business days to the Department of Ed.
So they don't have to report arrests, just criminal convictions.
Correct. That's a very good distinguishing fact. They can be arrested. We've seen rap sheets an arm long, and they've not resulted in conviction.
Right.
And we can do nothing to those individuals in terms of their certification.
Correct.
You as the employer have that authority
Yeah,
to
we
make the
say,
decision.
they have to report arrests.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a separate law that does speak to that about employment and arrests in the school system. But this particular piece is just for certification purposes, convictions only.
So as these policies and procedures are coming into play, we'll be reaching out to many of our stakeholder groups, including you, for feedback on this process. And we'll try to continue to give updates in our monthly webinars for certification and background credentialing, and any newsletters that go out. We are going to do a deep dive into reviewing a background check or a CBC, criminal background check, at the Teacher Leaders Summit. We'll go line by line. What does this look like? What are convictions? What are arrests? Because some folks aren't real clear on that. We would also tell you that we would, when you're reviewing those things, if you're not clear what it is, consult with your legal staff at your school system for clarification. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't have a law background, but reading these rap sheets can be a challenge sometimes. And so I'm constantly knocking on our lawyer's door, hey, help me with this, because it can be complex. And we don't want to prevent someone from certification or serving who's been falsely accused. All right, Christy, you want to take it from here?
Any questions? And we'll continue, as Paula mentioned, to update you in our regular monthly calls. If you're not already participating in those, I do recommend they're generally the 3rd Monday of every month at 10:30. You can find the link to those on the school system support calendar, where you can reach out and we'll be glad to send you the link for that. We delayed the last time providing these updates for policy because it was a lot. There was a lot on the agenda. We were still kind of digesting them ourselves. So what I'm going to provide for you now is a lot of the policy revisions that went to January Bessie. We did a lot of cleanup in January. We did a lot of revisions. And this that you see on the slide here are a lot of the things that we did. We adopted some new exams in response to the legislative session, also in response to some commission recommendations, that Computer Science Commission. We aligned the bulletins across each other to make sure that they aligned with each other and that they aligned with legislation. We did some removal of duplicative language. We reorganized quite a few sections. We also made an update on requirements for foreign equivalency transcripts. We'll talk about that in a little bit more in detail. We removed some obsolete or unused certifications. Some of those aren't necessarily applicable to y'all, but every time I think that there's a certificate that's not applicable to y'all, y'all surprise me and say, oh, we actually use that certificate. So we're including it all, and so you can just take what you need and leave the rest. We did update OFAT renewal requirements, and we did, of course, some technical updates and tried to simplify certification in general. Just a high point here, one of the updates did include the addition of the military OS to align with both state legislation and federal legislation around that. And so all of that policy was adopted as notice of intent. It comes off of notice of intent around May 20th. However, Through this deck, you will see that several of the policies we did include a different effective date. It's all after May 20th, but there are some different effective dates in there. And generally speaking, at the bottom of most of the slides, you'll have the effective date for that particular policy that is listed there. So the first piece that was to align with legislation that we were excited about, and I'm not really sure how applicable it is for you all in non-public, but again, like I said, y'all surprise me all the time, so providing this information to you all. We had a scenario where sometimes an educator would be contracted to a school system and not technically employed by that school system. And in those instances, there was no real way, unless the school system that they were contracted to evaluated them, there was no way for them to maintain their certification. When we realized that was going to take legislation, we worked with our legislators across the street last year to get the legislation amended so that we could do a couple of things. The big thing for you all is the mixing of evaluations and the non-public versus the public, and people that hop between the two can use the evaluation appropriate to their setting. But the other piece was for these third-party, we're going to call them third-party entities, if they're contracted to a school system not employed by them. These third-party entities, as long as they are approved by Bessie, can evaluate their educators for the purposes of maintaining certification. And so what happened at January Bessie was we actually put in place, Bessie adopted the policy for how they would approve these third-party entities, and we did a pilot round of approvals as well. So you'll see on this slide, there's a bunch of information. There's some links that show what the third-party entity approval guidance looks like. There is an assurance document that the entities would have to assure to us they're completing a background check, they're doing an evaluation, it looks like this, you know, they're gonna submit it to us. Then there's that approval rubric that says how we would approve them, and then there's the actual application portal. So with that, we did have 3 entities that we reached out to that we knew were interested in applying, and we used them as our guinea pigs in a pilot round of the application process. And they were also approved at January Bessie. The 3 entities are Southeastern, Lab School, and then the National Guard programs, which is YCP, Starbase, those entities like that, and then Edmonton Instructional Services. So those are the 3 that we currently have approved as third-party entities. If you are working with them and you were previously evaluating the educators on their behalf so they could maintain their certificate, they have the ability to evaluate the educators now themselves. Any questions about that? All right, so the next thing that we did was, as a result from recommendations from that Computer Science Education Advisory Commission, we, for the first time in, well, ever, we've never had a computer science exam adopted. We've always had to do 30 semester hours, so we adopted that computer science exam. It is the 5652. It is administered by ETS, Educational Testing Services. We did adopt the recommended cut score of 149. That recommended cut score was recommended as a part of a multi-state standard setting study. Say that 3 times fast. And so we did adopt that score. We did also want to make sure that for anybody that was currently enrolled in a teacher preparation program in Louisiana that already had the 30 semester hours, we wanted to make sure that there was a transitionary period and we didn't say, oh, you have to go take this test. So we're giving those candidates an additional 3 years to make sure that they complete their program before we can certify them, where we'll accept the 30 semester hours and they won't have to take that test. They can if they so choose, but if they're already enrolled, it would not necessarily do them, you know, any good to do that. And again, you'll see that that effective date is June 1st of this year. That effective date is on the bottom of that slide. Some other exams that we adopted and clarified, and just some reminders about some exam requirements. There was a piece of legislation that said beginning January 1st of 2024, a new science of reading exam had to be taken and passed by educators that are serving grades kindergarten through 3rd. And so for our out-of-state candidates, that effective date was in place. We worked with our legal office and they indicated that for our initial in-state applicants, we could give them a little bit longer runway. And so their runway is a little different. And so if they're in an in-state program and they are already enrolled in their year-long residency and they already hold that practitioner's license, that PL, or that R resident certificate prior to January 1st of 2025, they're not subject to that exam at all. They don't have to take that teaching and reading exam at all. They're kind of grandfathered in. We don't really like to use that, but that's kind of the idea behind it. So they're grandfathered in. So if you have any candidates that are already enrolled, that they're not subject to that particular exam. Now, literacy is a little complicated because there were several laws over several sessions that required a bunch of different things. And so one of them is also taking effect September 1st of this year, 2024, around the amount of hours of reading that are aligned to the science of reading. And so our add-on policy for this particular exam also aligns with that September 1st date. So if somebody is completing an add-on that is eligible to teach grades kindergarten through 3rd grade, which is a couple of different certification areas. You know, we have that pre-K to 3, we have elementary 1 to 5, and then of course it actually also includes all of our special education areas in our policy. If they're doing an add-on, they will have to have this exam as well. And that is effective September 1st of this year. So what we did around that literacy exam, because you know, for someone that is, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but for someone that is doing elementary 1 to 5 certification, there's 4 subtests they have to take, plus a pedagogy exam. Here's this other teaching and reading exam. So that's a bunch of tests. And so what we did was we worked with ETS to create a new multi-subjects exam that basically took the ELA portion of that elementary subtest and put it with that teaching and reading exam, and that is the new subtest for ELA. So it's a new combined test. It can be bundled new in the similar fashion to the 5001. And so we worked with them to go ahead and get this exam created. We also, in January, adopted this exam. What it does is it basically allows the candidates to take the same number of tests they've always been required to take, but still meet the requirements in the law. So it does include grades, anybody that's authorized to teach grades K to 3, which is PK to 3, 1 to 5, and then those special education areas. Now, one thing that we did do, we completed an in-state standard setting study, and the recommended cut score was a little bit lower. They take the just qualified candidate and see what they think they will score on these exams. So it was a little bit lower than probably what the national standard setting study has determined since then. And so we started with that lower score, but we're increasing it over time as we hope that our teacher preparation providers will increase our candidates' knowledge of the science of reading over the years. And so that is something that you will see change over time. A couple of things to note: we are not phasing out that 5001 or any of those subtests that are a part of the original elementary multiple subjects exam. And we are not phasing out any of the currently adopted teaching and reading exams either. We don't want to ever tell a student or a teacher candidate, oh, you have to go take this other test, even though it's just like the one that you took because of an adoption. So there's some mixing and matching that can happen. It gets a little complicated, but if you or your candidates have questions about it, just have them, feel free to reach out to our certification portal and we would have somebody answer there. That new bundle is the 7001. So we talked about literacy requirements, and they are complicated, but we are trying to increase the literacy of our students in Louisiana, and so our standards for our teachers are changing. Add-on literacy requirements, general add-on literacy requirements include a couple of things that you see here on this slide. So depending on the certification area or grade band that a teacher is serving in will determine how many hours of reading the candidate needs. It's 3 for secondary, 6 for middle school, and 9 for elementary and special education areas. Now, those general reading and literacy hours can be fulfilled with semester hours from a college or university. They can be fulfilled with the equivalent contact hours from a private provider. They can be fulfilled with the passing of that teaching of reading exam, if it's a general literacy requirement. Now, for that Act 108 training, the Literacy Foundations training, which I don't know if non-public schools are doing that or not, but those Literacy Foundations training can be accepted for the number of hours that are approved per program. Some of those programs are like AIMS, letters.
We have a letter.
Yeah, we are.
So those can be used in lieu of semester hours, and each program, depending on its complexity, there's a certain amount of hours that it's equivalent to. We do have a chart on our site that you can take a look at that. Those can be used for add-on purposes. Now, one thing with the letters, because there's like, I don't know, several different versions of the letters training. If your candidate is wanting to use the letters training certificates, those completion certificates need to be sent to Louisiana Literacy at la.gov. They will review and see if it's the version that the literacy team has approved for equivalency to semester hours, and they'll send the candidate, yes, it's approved for however many hours or not. That email from Louisiana Literacy at la.gov would need to be included with their add-on application. There's just too many versions for our small team to know what. We're not the literacy experts, so we're going to outsource that a little bit. And we did update all of our add-on and our checklists so that people know what the changes that have been made, especially for add-on since it's coming up 9/1 is the effective date. Now that was the general literacy. These are the requirements if they're teaching in grades kindergarten through 3rd or special education. So for those folks, because there's 2 laws, they essentially have to take the exam and the semester hours. So they can't double dip and take 2 exams and get the equivalent of all the hours. So they do have to do both, an exam and the hours. And those evaluations have been updated as well. All of that policy about the add-on is effective September 1st of this year. Any questions about literacy? It's complicated. We often get lots of questions about it. All right, so the next piece that, I don't know, Paul and I are kind of excited about is the foreign equivalency update. We have worked and done a survey through our partners with NASDAQ to see what other states are doing. The trend and the standard now for foreign equivalency transcripts is that the credentialing agency needs to be an endorsed member and in good standing with one of these 2 credentialing associations, and so that's the National Association of Credentialing Evaluation Services, NACES, or AICE, Association of International Credential Evaluators. So what this will do for anybody that has a foreign transcript, it will open up the number of credentialing agencies that they have the ability to go to. There may be a few on our site that will no longer be valid for us to use because we adopted that they have to be a member in good standing. Now, this policy doesn't take effect until around May 20th, so for now, if they have anything that was done before May 20th, we'll still be able to use it if they're on our list. But after May 20th, they will need to be a member of one of these 2 associations, and it will likely, like I said, open up their...
And I've updated that link on Teach Louisiana already, so if you go click the link, it'll tell you who's approved and link to the directory of NACES and AIC.
Both of those. So the next piece is around out-of-field authority to teach. I don't know if y'all use these or not. Like I said, I'm gonna flag it for you because y'all always surprise me. The out-of-field authority to teach policy was updated for renewal. It's a 3-year certificate, and there are a few areas that can get that 1-year extension or that 2-year extension according to those areas. So for those, we consider those a renewal. The policy was updated to, we will not be considering a renewal for an OFAT if the individual hasn't attempted at least 50% of the requirements. If they've had 3 years and they've not made 50%, the chances that they're going to finish the rest in a year or 2 are slim to none. So we're trying to kind of do that as a protective measure for everybody. And so this is an update that has been made as of January, Bessie. So that is notice of intent policy effective around about May 20th. The other piece that I have is we are aware that about 19% of the teachers that are certified are certified but not teaching in the subject area that they're certified in. And so they may or may not be on an OFAT, but they're teaching out of their area. So because of that, we have designated some funds to help pay for the necessary practice assessments for any teachers that are teaching outside of their area that might be on an OFAT.
And this is available for Nonpublic?
As far as I'm aware, yes, ma'am.
Really? That's exciting. For the big stuff.
It's for the teacher.
It's for the teacher. It's for the teacher, right, right.
No
It's
matter
for the
where they
teacher.
serve.
Right. And so, in addition, if they pass this assessment, we may also have the funding available to pay for their certification to get the OFAT, so that fee. So it would be a voucher for the exam, and it would be a voucher to pay for the certification. Now, for you all, do y'all participate in EdLink? There may be a different way for you to get your list.
Yes.
Okay.
we do.
So then the EdLink list, okay, so you can use that list if you haven't already. You can use your EdLink link to find your OFAT teachers if you don't already know who they are. There's also an OFAT practice support application. You can send that link to your teachers that are on the OFATs. If they complete that, if they're interested, we ask that they complete that by July 19th. That'll give them enough time to go ahead and schedule and pass the exam in time to be able to get their certification paid for as well. So these are ESSER dollars, so they do have to be out the door by a certain time this year, and so that's why we have that July 19th date in there so that they can successfully complete both of those. So once you get this deck, you can click on that link. It's also going to be in the principal's newsletter later this week if you participate in that. That link will be there.
And support is through Louisiana Leaders at LA.gov.
Right.
The certification specialists may not know all the ins and outs of this process.
Right.
So Louisiana Leaders is your go-to for questions.
That's part of our new division, yay. So we are partnering with Dr. Kevin Nanny over there to make that happen. The last pieces of policy that we want to talk about is some certification simplification. So at January Bessie, we did some things to simplify certification. We wanted to streamline it, simplify it. You know, in some instances, you might have an art teacher that has an artist endorsement on her certificate, but if he or she wants to teach talented, they would have to go get the talented artist ancillary certificate. So we streamlined some things where we could allow things that were standalone only to be an endorsement now as well. So that's some of the simplification that we did. So if they want to have artist, creative, writing, drama, dance, music, theater, visual arts added to their certificate as an endorsement, they can now do that and don't have to maintain 2 certificates. Same thing for talented music, theater, and visual arts. If they can add that as an endorsement and don't have to have a separate certificate. School librarian was one of those areas that you could get a standalone if you had this requirement, but you can get an endorsement if you had this requirement. So we married the two, allowed it for either one, so that it just simplifies the process for the educators so they don't have to maintain multiple certificates. So we are trying to make it simple for everyone involved.
And that's out for notice of intent.
Right.
Scheduled probably around May.
Right. And then the last piece of certification simplification were, and again, I don't know if you all use these or not, but again, you surprise me all the time. So if an individual holds licensure by another Louisiana state board, appropriate to whatever services they provide, like physical therapist, occupational therapist, something like that, if they have a license in good standing with that board, they'll be considered deemed certified by Bessie beginning June 1st of this year. So we will no longer be issuing those after June 1st. Anybody that has one, we're not going to take that away from them, but they'll be considered certified as of June 1st. That's for like social worker, audiologist, all your speech pathologist, all of your occupational therapists, your physical therapists, those, any of the assistants, all of those, behavior analysts. As we get a little bit closer to this effective date of June 1st, we'll have some guidance documents out there that point you to, hey, this is a licensing board where you need to go look for their license, those kind of things. We're working on that currently. So again, that is effective June 1st. Any questions about all of that? I know that was a lot. All right, then Paula is just going to.
A few little reminders. Christy mentioned that the law went into place where we could mix evaluations for educators. So if they are serving with you in non-public and then they go to the public school, we can mix those two. So I wanted to just go over the methods of evaluation very quickly with you. We are requiring the experience verification form be submitted with almost every certification application so we can see where were they serving, public, non-public, out of state, so on. If an educator served in a public school, we're looking for compass evaluations. And by the way, that's going to change. It's going to be called LEADS in the upcoming months and years. Basically, it's the evaluation that the state's requiring for the public schools. If an educator is in a non-public, we'll look for that local personnel evaluation, and you verify that on a document that gives us the scale and were they successful. If an educator is contracted to a public school, we'll be looking for the employer evaluations from that BESI-approved entity. Christy mentioned we have 3 that were recently approved, and so they can evaluate their own employees, and you nor the public school would need to do that. Also, the non-public or asterisk certificates are no longer being issued. We're transitioning all these folks to just the regular certificates. So we have an evaluation guidance document that's linked here. It's been out for a while, but if you need a refresher, it is available to you. So the form, the differences, it's now landscape, so we have more space on there. All fields need to be completed for each school year or role. We ask it be month and year. You don't have to get down to the day. So month and year. Employment setting is required. Tell us, is it at your non-public setting? Evaluation method must be chosen, as we have indicated here. And that final column, we've also built in links to the form so you can reference it to the reference documents. Because sometimes it's like, now what am I supposed to put here? And there's kind of like a key you can go to. Self-evaluation. So when someone's requesting an add-on to their certificate, we require that they do their own little self-evaluation to be included with the document. That way it saves them time and money. Don't apply for something you haven't yet fulfilled. So do the self-evaluation. And we ask that they do that and that they include course prefixes, course numbers, and any course descriptions that may not necessarily look like what they're called. You've seen those on transcripts. We do all the time. Alrighty. I think that's all. If you have questions, our fearless leader, Dr. Jofrion, has provided his email address there, and you can reach out to him. You can reach out to us through the certification@la.gov or through our online certification portal. Thank you.
Very much. Wow. Thank you. Great progress. Any further discussion? Any opposition? Okay, the last item on our agenda is consideration of discussion regarding instructional minutes requirements. I need a motion to receive the report. Mr. Carroll. Michelle. Okay. Good morning, Nikki. It's almost afternoon, so hurry up.
All right, I passed out a piece of paper. Good luck with that. Now, I want to thank you all for being here. I spoke with Sister Carol a few weeks ago, and she had some questions. This topic that has to do with instructional minutes and instructional days and times comes up periodically with all of us. And so we want to open up a discussion for y'all today. Let y'all kind of give us your thoughts. How do you interpret this? What problems are none are you experiencing with this policy and the laws and statutes? So in the information that was sent to you, I put a couple of pieces in here. There are 2 sections here from your non-public bulletin. It talks about instructional time. You'll see the number of minutes that they have there for that. It also is referenced in your attendance section in non-public 741, because in order to issue Carnegie credits or grades and so forth, they have to be a minimum amount. Initially, when I sent the information to you, the only statute that I had to link to this had to do with public schools. Non-public is silent in this. It specifically says public school, with the exception of one line where it simply says school. Sometimes people can interpret that when they use just the term school to be all schools, but usually it will say public school, non-public school specifics. Then, this morning, I received a message, and I gave you a copy of the second statute that we have. This statute, 17236, actually does address non-public schools. Several years ago, when we were doing a review of your bulletin, the update was made that removed the number of days requirement and left simply the number of instructional minutes in the bulletin. There are a number of different types of non-public schools, and they operate in different formats for scheduling. You have year-round schools, you have block schedules, you have traditional fall and spring semesters. So the number of days was removed to permit all of those different types of scheduling to coexist and remain within policy. One of the big conversations that we had at that time had to do with the difference of the required instructional minutes between public school and non-public school. And after extensive conversations around that, the compromise was made to remove the number of days to allow that scheduling differences to be honored, but to leave the instructional minutes alone. In the law, the statute that I passed out to you, talks about the number of days. Number of days is in statute. 180. In your bulletin, days is not mentioned, but your instructional minutes are there. There's a lot of math that goes into going from minutes to days to hours to the school year to how many teacher days and student days and all of that. So there's a lot of different ways that that information is calculated and interpreted. And so what I want to do for you all here today is to open up that conversation among yourself as to how do you calculate that? How do you interpret those things between statute and policy and your local calendars and so forth? And I want to take some notes from your conversation today to bring back to our policy team to see if there is something that needs to be adjusted in this. That would not happen before any revisions were brought back to this group. You will see that before it would go forward to Bessie. So, sister, you're the one that started this conversation with us.
You gotta understand something. We don't have school busing in our area, so we're not dictated by the school bus for our students, number one.
So that's a big piece because a lot of schools have to run their schedule
By the school bus.
because of the
Okay, so
school
that is number two. The other issue is, my understanding has always been 741 non-public is for the secular subjects of our schools, okay? We run a 360-minute day, which includes religion. And we run a 63,000-minute year, which includes religion, which is, and then, of course, my principals will say, not Lisa, but that's, well, why do we have to go to school so much? Public school's been out 2 weeks already. I said, well, I don't know, but I was told by Monroe Public School Superintendent that their school day started when the first kid gets on the school bus. I don't know what kind of education goes on there, but that's how they count their day. They have a 4 and 20 minute day. And so therefore they calculate quickly and therefore they go on home. So my issue with this is, I mean, I know this statute because I've tried to research myself. I also know that this 57,000 minutes is, my opinion, is for, if you look at Bulletin 741, it tells you how many minutes you need to have for ELA, how many reading, how much, the Carnegie unit, which I know Paul is going away eventually, is in order to qualify. And so therefore, my DOS of the policy is we go to school 178 days, 360 minutes a day, and that does include, and that makes us more than these little 57,000 minutes. But to me, that's just covering the secular subjects. That's not covering what else we have. I don't know. I just know I live in an area on the east and west side of the northern part of the state that the public schools are going 163 days. And it's really rubbing my parents bad because, you know, I don't ever go to school. And that's true. So I don't know. I don't know the rule. I don't know. I have 3 different things here to tell me what to do, and I have a DOS policy that they are going to do.
So when you say that there may be a public school or system with a certain number of days, are those in-person days? Or does that incorporate some virtual days or a combination thereof?
When I look at Caddo Parish, and I look at Washita Parish, and Pass and Monroe City, there's not any of that at all that's in there. It's just, here's our public school calendar. Obviously, if we have inclement weather, they throw in a virtual day. Not a problem, because then they can count that on, for us, we would count that on required services. So the whole issue is that, to me, it's tied together. If you only go to school 160 days, you only get reimbursed for 160 days, because that's all you worked. So that's where my issue is. But up until this change several years ago, we were days. And then there was an outline of what made up a day, number of minutes. And so then this came floating by us. And well, I don't want my kids people in school. That's what you thinking now.
I'm totally confused.
Totally confused.
No, but goes back to the teacher contract. Do you put number of days in your contract?
I do. It's based on days. It's
187?
I put 180 days and 220 days for principals.
Our diocese has the minimum number of days for teacher professional development, contact for students, but right after Katrina, we were all following days. And so when some schools lost 15 days, and the issue was, will we be in school in the summer? And I think the state at that point just kind of waived a lot of things. Then we went to minutes, which does help with hurricanes, Hurricane Ida. We had schools in our area out for a lengthy number of times. So the minutes have allowed us to rework our schedules, cut down, if we had a recess, get rid of that, or maybe start 5 or 10 minutes early. So that has been a benefit. So we appreciate the minutes. We always calculate our time, like in sister schools, over the minimum. So that way we're not playing catch up in the end. What we've seen in our local district is that if they don't use hurricane time or minutes, all of a sudden the last week of May comes around and they say, okay, we're over the time, we're letting out a week early.
Yeah.
That drives our people crazy because then it affects bus service, but then what?
So you're saying a public school?
A public school, yes. If they haven't used minutes and they have the days, they'll just start letting out early.
And Ms. Jason, is that in the calendar? For instance, when they pass, the board passes the calendar, do they say that, I'm making these things up, May 15th is the last day if we do not use, no, just.
Not the calendar given to us. They provide us with a calendar, not the calendar given to
Not
us.
I've not seen that on the Monroe City calendar either, and that happens in our area also.
Right. Oh, yeah. 163 days they claim to go. Most times it's about 150. I asked the question, and I was informed by a public school board member, is that we decide when our principal and teachers work, not the state.
But the law says 177 days of instruction.
It does.
It does.
I know. That's the reason why we're having this
That
conversation.
gets complicated when I was trying to help the principal the other day. I'm sorry for just speaking out, but, like what constitutes a half a day of courses that, when you talk about literacy, does that include social studies where you're cross-curriculum? You know, that you are covering some of those skills and, I mean, it gets confusing to the principal what they can count as half of your day is required to devote to core subjects. But again, if you're doing cross-curriculum, you might have literacy in social studies per se.
Right.
So I don't know, I didn't know how to help with
Dr. Armstrong has been raising her hand.
But just a question. Okay, so statutes would supersede 741. Okay,
Yes,
there you go.
ma'am.
Okay, so the statute for non-public says 180 days. The statute for public says 177.
Instructional. It also
Instructional.
Right.
So, okay, but
It says, there's a, oh, I'm sorry.
But the other one for non-public says in session 180 days, whatever that means, you know, possibly instructional. But the other question I have, non-public 741 instructional minutes is 57 plus 1,000. Public school instructional minutes is 63 plus thousands. So for me, first thing, the perception that we are teaching instructional time so much less than the public schools
30 minutes a day.
per non-publics is not true. I mean, it's in most cases. So I think we have a perception area, you know, the optics are not good there if someone's comparing our public schools with our non-publics as far as instructional minutes. But I think we need to balance the instructional minutes with the number of instructional days. Both are reading different, you know, whether it's revised statute or whether it's 741. And then another little spoke of that wheel is another House legislative bill that's coming through right now too, are those schools, those 4 days a week for some schools versus what we do, the 5 days. So I think there's a lot of different factors associated here because some of the parishes are going 4 days a week.
Well, they're able to utilize those minutes,
But
it's that 30 minutes a day, we're done.
But that really needs to go there.
Exactly.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, in the new ESA bill, it states 180 days. The school is defined as 180 days. So that's going to even add more confusion to this. I really would recommend we do another work group to look at this, because I don't think this is, I mean, we all have different issues and different, but I think the concern is there. I think we did the work group, because I was on it, it was like several years ago, right, like 5 or 6 years ago. But that would be my recommendation, if possible, that we establish another work group to look at this. Because, like Judy said, there's things coming up in the bills that, you know, define a school as 180 or this amount, then we have got statute, then we've got the public policy bulletins, so that would be my recommendation if possible.
That's what I was gonna recommend, that either people from this body or, you know, bringing other principals in, but I think we need some clarity before, and then with all the bills coming up, no telling, you know, they might do 190 days, some people do 140, okay. So I mean, I just think it's a gray area moving forward, but I think all of us sitting around this table in our own areas, you know, we demand that of our schools. And I mean, I don't look to see what the public schools are doing. I mean, and if they're going to compare, well, so be it. But you know, I just think we have to be okay with what we're asking our schools to do.
Dr. Baker?
Just a couple of things, and I'll throw this snake on the table a little bit too. All of these 180 days are based on the idea of a Carnegie unit, which I think is going away in education. There's so much other ways to look at how students can succeed and do succeed and gain credit for something beyond just seat time in a class. I mean, even right now we have credit by exam. That's part of what we do. And so we have skills-based and sort of whole new transcripts that aren't even based on this sort of thing that are coming, right? And so it feels like we're chasing a bit of a nostalgic target, number one, at 180 days, because that's what was done in 1900, and that's what was done in 1950, and that's what was done in 1970. And so we are chasing this kind of target on some level that makes sense in people's heads because that's what they grew up with, but it doesn't necessarily make the most sense in terms of what we can do. The other part of this that for me is really difficult, because we go by the minutes as well, and our day is the longest day of any school in our area. We're from 8 to 3:30.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, and so our students have a difficult time competing in sports. We can't get them, they have to miss class. But we hit the minute mark pretty easily because of that length of day. And it gives us, again, sort of the flexibility to be able to do some of the things that we want to do as an independent private school, right, non-public school. There's no easy answer here, but I think probably a deeper dive into this is warranted.
Totally agree, I agree. Good point. The thing is, with that Carnegie unit thing, the tops will have to follow along.
Oh, no, yeah, no, there's just so many pieces in this, Carol. I mean,
Exactly.
it's an unsolvable puzzle, but I mean, we can try. We can start on
get
it.
some clarity.
Let's get some clarity. Right. I'll serve. Kimberly will the chair. Thanks. My friend.
So let me ask you, with the recommendation for the work group, and having had a discussion that there is pending legislation, do we wait on legislation to see how that would impact any discussion of the group? Or
I wouldn't think so. The one legislation that's coming forward is to abolish the 4-day school.
Except for the 180-day requirement in the ESA bill.
Yes. Is it 180 or 177? It says 180.
It says 180 is the definition of school is 180s, and that's all it says.
okay, I have made some notes. I will also go back and listen to the recording and be sure that I have the things that you all have offered. This is a complex issue that we are trying to make fit for dozens of different scenarios with length of day, with schedule, with location, with transportation, without transportation, with your elementary students, it's going to be different than your high school. You're right, it's a very complex, layered issue. And so I will take this back, I will get with our policy team, our legislative, Ben, who works in that area as well, and we'll have something to offer to you and to see what do we want to schedule, when, how, and the makeup for it. And I was part of that work group years ago when we did that. So there are things that we'll reach out to you all to see how we want to.
And that's perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Okay, when I looked at the agenda, I said, oh, we'll be out here at 10:30. Sorry, I was wrong. But it was very good information. We're very appreciative of all the people who have joined us from the department, and also to Tom and Judy. And everyone have a wonderful Easter. Our next meeting is on July the 16th. So that seems far away, but guess what? Before you know it, we'll be reconvening.
Motion to
Motion to adjourn.
second.